All right. Hello. And as you can tell, I am back in the studio. I am finally home from reInvent. Actually, I've been home now 48 hours, um, something like that. And
Okay.
today is the promised after I had time to kind of think about it. We did our Andy and I did our hot take of reInvent. So I had some time to think about it, and I'm gonna play some fancy thing I rendered last night. So
I
you
like
got
it.
got the good music today. You need a little bit of that Monday motivation for the music.
That's true. It is. Is it Monday?
I
It
think it
feels
is.
like it's Wednesday already.
It. I'm still. I'm still a little jet lagged. I couldn't go to sleep last night,
Yeah,
1 or 2 in the morning. It was.
that's hard.
It's been a wild weekend. Roberta sprained her ankle. Um,
Oh
the
no.
the foster dog, who's not a foster dog anymore, has had to have surgery because she needed stitches. She
Oh
so it's
no.
been it was kind of a throw back into the fire. On the
Yeah.
plus side, though, we did get some Christmas lights hung on the roof, so that was cool.
Excellent.
First
Excellent.
Christmas at the new house. So,
That's
how about
important.
you?
Same old, same old. We've been working on projects here around the house. I've got some interesting work that I've been doing for a client, and then some other interesting work I'm doing that I hope to debut at Sequel Bits. I'm doing a training day at Sequel Bits in Wales in March.
Very cool. Very cool. It's
Yeah, so
it's
excited
uh
about that.
it's good that
Yeah.
we're getting back out there. Like it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd say my past experience, it was nothing. Past was awesome. The
Mhm.
bit of it that I attended, but I realized I got there on like Saturday, and I had a pre-con on Monday, which was great to be able to do that. And and it's funny how these pre-cons work, Frank. You know this because you and I talk all the time, and like I consistently apply, to them. Although usually if I'm picked, I won't apply the next year. Give somebody else a chance, but pretty consistently,
Right.
submit, and I get picked like every third or fourth or fifth year, and of course now it's coinciding, so it looks like Andy's doing pre-cons everywhere, and it's like, yeah, but not last or the year before, or anyway. So I'm
It's still
excited
good though.
about
I've seen
that.
you present.
You
I would go to your one of your pre-cons for sure.
Well, thanks, Frank. I appreciate that. I still don't get it, but I tell people, I've been trapped in here with me for almost 60 years now, and I'm just not that impressed. So, but it
That's
is a
funny.
lot of fun. The ADF Precon that I'm doing in it is similar. So I had one I did for years, and I really beefed it up for the past summit, and I'm working on a new piece yet still for sequel bits. I always like to bring something out, something new and shiny out for it, and I'll tease it. Ah, there we go. Sent me
Mhm.
this from Vegas, right?
I did. Yeah, I saw this
That
and
is so cool.
I was like, so this was at the Tropicana where I ended up staying.
That's funny.
Which the Tropicana was, and it's a good hotel, but um, any minute now, like when as I was walking around there, like I just expected either Hunter Thompson to like walk by with the cigarette holder and the hat, or
Right,
Frank
right.
Sinatra and like Sammy Davis Jr. and Dean Martin like walk by because it was very
There they
much like
go. Yeah.
it was very not renovated in a while.
You sent me a
So it
picture
was
of the lobby when you got there, and it was awesome. I thought it was great. I thought you were home, Frank. That was the first thought I thought that shot through my mind. Frank is home. Yeah.
because it was very Atlantic City.
Well, no, I mean, it just had that vibe about it. I mean, you're a unique collection of qualities,
Which
and
is true.
and I know you're a Hunter Thompson fan. I don't mean it negative. It's all good,
Mhm.
but
Oh no, I know you
big Hunter
didn't.
Thompson and all of that. Yeah.
It was fun. It was
Good.
I hadn't been in Vegas now in like 3 years.
Yeah.
Like like it.
Yeah.
You can't, and you can't avoid it, right? Like so. I
Right.
mean, it was interesting. I gotta turn off my desktop. Sorry. I noticed that this laptop either needs a complete pave because I'm having audio driver issues, and
Yeah.
that we were troubleshooting out before the stream, and I've noticed like sometimes the stream will skip, and it's not an old laptop, so it should be able
Yeah.
to handle it, but for some reason, not so much.
It's weird.
So I did have a couple of like takeaways
From reInvent there.
from reInvent. Sorry, I totally need coffee. Like it's just like, um, one, I'm impressed with the size and scale and the logistics of being able to do something at this size. I mean, it
Yeah.
was, um, the Microsoft ecosystem. You and I kind of grew up in the Microsoft ecosystem, so this was all kind of new territory
Right.
for me. And one, this
Okay.
was the 10th year of reInvent, right? So this is no longer a new conference. Now I know they have
Right.
Remars, and like there's another one they have that's still they kind of do and kind of not do. But for the most part,
Yeah.
it seems like Amazon's philosophy is everything all at once, like one big event. And
Nice.
at one level, you have to wonder, like, the logistics behind that must be just absolutely insane. Why do that? But I also think that the opportunities for cross-pollination, not pollination.
I know what you meant.
Yeah. Next note to self: load up on coffee before the live stream, but not too much coffee, because then it's
No.
like, then it's a little too Hunter Thompson, I suppose. And so it was interesting. So what was cool was like you could go to events that were partner focused. You can go to parts that were developer focused, and
Yeah.
and parts that sessions that were like IT ops centric. It was I kind of like that. Like, and it was every hotel obviously in Vegas has its own. I think this was spread across 4 or 5 different hotels. The Venetian was kind of the central part.
Nice.
I only made it to like 3 hotels where stuff was. So I spoke at Mandalay Bay. I was at the Mandalay Bay.
Okay.
I went to Caesars the last day, which is where I had my big aha moment, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Okay.
And MGM.
Okay.
So, which is funny because the last time I was in Vegas, we were at something called Digital Transformation Academy, which was a brainchild of someone who's a very senior exec, who's known for owning boats, empathy, leather jackets, and giving a lot of money to sociology professors. Which there are people who are watching this like, oh, I know who he means. And there's most other people like, what is he talking about?
Right.
So it was cool. Like, I only attended. So this time, since the pandemic, I've gotten so used to watching these sessions and stuff, at 1.5 speed, right? Like the recorded or something like that. So
Sure.
I really prioritize going to workshops this time.
Okay.
So I went to 2 workshops that were really good. One was it was basically how to use SageMaker which is their instance of Jupyter Notebooks, basically their data science tool. How to use SageMaker to take open data of like satellite imagery and detect deforestation over time. That was really cool. I learned a lot about SageMaker. I also learned about how satellite imagery, some of the terms there, and some of the what the raw data looks like. And turns out the raw data off the satellite is not really usable in a lot of ways. So you kind of have to do all this. If you want to, for instance, if you want to detect vegetation, you had to, you take pictures taken in this data from there, you overlay it, and then you kind of subtract, and you can kind of create a really cool visualization on it. Yeah, it was really interesting. I hadn't really worked much with satellite stuff.
And here I just thought it was pictures.
Yeah, who knew? No, but there are like, for lack of a better term, I'll call it
Mm,
RGB photos from space. But if you really want to detect just deforestation, and I'm totally forgetting which exact band it was, but I think near infrared
hmm,
vegetation tends to reflect, and even then, there's different types of vegetation,
sure.
canopy levels, and things like that. I was reading through the notes, and I was like, wow, this is a rabbit hole. Like you can easily get down on this and just get lost. But
Nice.
depending on so what they'll do is when the satellite is up there, they'll run they'll take pictures in different spectrums, right? So depending on the spectrum and what you're looking for, you can do that.
Yeah.
And these are just like open source stuff. I can imagine that if you had a really high, multi-trillion-dollar budget, you can probably do some interesting things with that as well. But it
Yeah.
was cool to kind of work with that data and stuff like that. And what was really interesting was at the end, there was you were able to basically push up and create a web-based app
Nice.
with what is the name of the product? This is one critique I do have with AWS, right? Is that the product names, I don't know if they're cute meant to be cutesy, but it is hard to remember them. I think it was AWS Lightsail,
Okay.
or there's a lot of these product names, right? So it's not
Yeah.
like people make fun of Microsoft all the time, right, for their product names. Enterprise this, Service Pack 4, all that.
Right.
But
Right.
when you hear, I'll mention something you're an expert in, ADF, right? Azure Data Factory says what it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's kind of it's I guess if you're in it a lot and you do it a lot, like what it's called, but
Yeah.
it does kind of get this. But anyway, there's this one tool where basically you had a JavaScript file and it would basically do all the underlying infrastructure. It was basically that was really the kind of the piece de resistance of it.
That
And
sounds good.
another, it was really cool. It was really cool. It was a good chance to kind of get dirty with AWS, like get hands on and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
The other talk, a workshop I really enjoyed was the Deep Racer, and this is a well named one
Hmm.
because it's basically used deep reinforcement learning to teach little race cars how to drive, right? Like model race cars how to drive, which has
Cool.
some interesting implications for autonomous cars and just kind
Hmm.
of autonomous systems in general, right?
Okay.
Very interesting talk. I didn't get a chance to, because I had some work related stuff to do. I didn't get a chance to kind of take the model I trained and then actually race it on a car because the line for that was just ridiculous. However, you can actually buy the race cars and they're not prohibitively expensive.
Whoa.
So, Christmas is coming. The kids' birthdays are coming. My birthday's not that far behind. Just
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
putting
There
it
you
out there
go.
into the universe. Um, um, we have our first comment from Kevin Krawcheck. Anything from Health Lake? So I saw some healthcare related topics, but I spent the first like half of it mostly working on making sure that my demos and slides were done right.
Yeah. So this was your
um,
first time speaking at
this
reInvent
was
as
my
well.
at reInvent, and the first time at a
Yeah.
big conference since um in a few years. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
since before the plague, but like since maybe 2015, I would
Yeah.
say.
Wow.
No, 2017, I did a big conference. So it was kind of good to do that. And here's an interesting any quantum machine learning. So one of the things that I did attend was a quantum key distribution talk. There were a number of quantum talks, and again, this is kind of the downside of being at an event that this large across this many
Right.
hotels is, um, you know, I missed the quantum ML one, but I did manage to I did manage to walk through, the expo floor. They had kind of AWS Village, right? So kind of at the center of it. So there were all this different stuff, but there was a pretty good, and I actually caught this on a live stream when I was walking through there. That was the robot bartender. Fortunately, before the Wi-Fi cut off on me, so I'm like walking around, like talking, and like had no idea that I was You know, it was like a 25-minute stream, and I think it cuts off at around minute 19. So it wasn't that bad, but it's definitely been a while since I did a like kind of a roving kind of reporter type thing on a live stream.
Right.
But one of the things that really did impress me is how far along AWS is in quantum computing. You know, I did not know. I mean, same on me. I mean, kind of makes sense. But AWS has a pretty sizable research department, which, you know, not like on the scale of like Microsoft Research that I'm aware of, but like Microsoft Research is pretty transparent about what they do and what, you know, and also I was in that world, so like I kind of knew that. But what was interesting is that, you know, you meet all these people who are from Amazon Research, and there was a really good talk on quantum key distribution, and you know how to basically build a secure quantum encrypted network. That was very fascinating, and you know, for me, it was a milestone because it was the first quantum talk that I got through to the end. I understood everything that was going on.
Nice, Frank.
Which was just like, I can speak this now. Like that was a good feeling. There was to Kevin's question, there was a couple of like quantum applications in machine learning talks, but one of them was Monday night, and I was still at the airport, so I missed that. But that's the other thing too. If I had a bit of critique, there's no clear definition of when the conference starts and when it ends.
Interesting.
Right. So officially, like the keynotes and stuff start Tuesday, but there's also sessions starting Monday afternoon.
Interesting.
Which is tough anyway, because it's always right after Thanksgiving.
Right.
So it's kind of like, you know, I was not very popular at home because I did leave like immediately after Thanksgiving.
Oh, goodness.
You know, so it's kind of, you know, it's kind of a mixed thing. Like, I didn't want to travel on Thanksgiving weekend because everybody else is traveling on Thanksgiving weekend. So I wanted to avoid that. But that was an interesting aspect to it. But the talk that really, really got my juices flowing was the one I think I was telling you about. And we talked about it briefly on the hot take recap, which was it was basically building, you know, what AWS has learned from, you know, IoT and capturing all these data from all their facilities. Now, I had played around or had been exposed to what Microsoft has, and I think the site is called like 88 acres or something like that, where they basically take the main campus and kind of have wired that up with IoT sensors and things like that.
Right.
And kind of what they've learned from that, and kind of, you know, how do you build an architecture and things like that. And but Amazon, just by nature of, you know, the warehouses, the office buildings, the server rooms, right? Yeah. They have a pretty wide array of buildings to capture data from.
Right.
And this is the one I think I was talking to you as I'm walking back, because getting an Uber or Lyft or cab from one hotel to the other is not always straightforward. So it was also nice to be in Vegas in December and not like July. I will say there was markedly a difference in weather. But it was interesting because they kind of run through, like, you know, all the data that they captured and what they've managed to kind of glean from their insights. And one of the things that was really struck me was, you know, on the surface, it's an IoT talk, right? Right. About IoT and sustainability. However, as we dove into the slides, and I took pictures of them and they're on my LinkedIn, you can check them out. It really quickly becomes a data story, a data science story, an AI story, right? Predictive maintenance, you know, prescriptive maintenance story. But then really when you sit back and you kind of lay out all the facts, it's a data engineering story.
Nice.
Hands down. Right? Because there's streaming data, there's real-time data, and then and they have a lot of experience with doing this. So they know, like, you know, some things do need real-time attention. Like one of the examples was, you know, if the HVAC unit starts breaking, that probably needs like immediate attention.
Right.
But if it's you know, other problems can be kind of done in batch. And when they showed the architecture slide, most of it was really about the data engineering aspect of it.
Interesting.
And another interesting data point, so to speak, was the amount of data that gets collected. And I can pull up the slide, but I don't want to be distracted. I also don't want to tempt the CPU on this thing to start flaking out again. But it basically boils down to that even a quote unquote modest commercial real estate portfolio
Yeah.
of about 90 buildings um, will generate a petabyte of data per year.
Goodness.
That's still a lot of data.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
I'm sure 10 years from now, when we look back at this live stream or recording, we'll laugh because, the iPhone 27 will be out and it'll have, a petabyte option. But it was interesting to kind of see how much data gets generated, right? And again, that's on average, portfolio, right? So if you look at, who knows how much data that AWS is generating, right? They didn't really exactly share that. Given all the buildings they have, you can probably infer that it's well above a petabyte a year.
Probably. Yeah.
You also have to think about what are real estate people like Grant Cardone, right?
Yeah.
Someone we've mentioned quite a bit. Like, how much data does his buildings generate? Does he even track and record all this data? Yeah,
True.
we don't know. Another thing that made me wonder as I'm walking down up the Vegas Strip was how much data do the casinos generate? Because those are certainly not average buildings.
Yes.
Those are, and they, as I always like to say, Vegas is the town that statistics and data science built, right? Everything in that town, from the table to the placement of the tables, to the games that are chosen, the rules, the way they shuffle the decks, everything is built to optimize house advantage. And it's an open secret, right? They'll never say that, but I mean, it's pretty clear. You don't build these massive, buildings, just to do that. It was fascinating to kind of see. Like, you have to wonder how much data did they generate? From the security cameras to, the loyalty plans. I think it's a question of, do they do facial recognition? Isn't like, do they do facial recognition? It's just how prevalent is it? I've had people tell me kind of, off the record, is that they actually tried facial recognition, but it wasn't reliable for a number of reasons, which I find that hard to believe. I find that personally hard to believe. Maybe initially, maybe like 5-10 years ago, it wasn't practical, but I would suspect that now it totally is. There's also some, one of the things that the Kinect did, if you remember that, it did the gesture recognition and kind of your pose estimation. That actually now can be done entirely with an RGB camera, not near infrared.
Interesting.
So you can imagine, could you identify somebody, by the way they walk, right? That's kind of so if you're looking for a particular, card counter or cheater or whatever, could they be identified not just by their face, but also by their, by the way they walk? So even all of this to say, that's just conjecture. I have no proof of that. It's just kind of me scratching my chin and pondering the universe. But it's also just think about the data that they have to collect here, right? And that goes back to the insight I had at the IoT building talk, was data engineering is the glue that holds us together, right? And it's just that. I think you would have dug it, like, that talk alone, and I'm sure everything was recorded. So, and if you think back to, the first big Vegas conference I went to was Mobile and Embedded Developer Conference 2006. and they would send you the DVDs or CDs, months later
Nice.
of all the session talks. Now they just upload them to YouTube, right? So
Right.
that would have been science fiction back in the day, but now it's just kind of assumed. And my talk went well. I'm looking forward to see the recording of that. But it was an interesting event. I wish that sorry, we have a guy coming to help finish hanging the lights on the house. So he just
you mentioned
before. Plus, I have an expense report to do. But it was it was interesting. It was good to be kind of out in a big conference like that, because you get to meet people. I met some very interesting folks. Got to meet a lot of other Red Hatters that I've interacted with. It was like they 3D printed everyone.
Nice.
And so these big conferences, they're fun. You get to meet people. You get to network. But I am definitely, to what Kevin said, I definitely want to take a deeper dive into more of what AWS has in terms of quantum.
Right. Yeah.
So do you have any questions, or anyone, Andy, or anyone else watching live, or
I know this is going to take longer to answer than you have, but I will share that for people who haven't seen the hot take, right at the very end, Frank and I had a little back and forth about which is the better cloud, which is the bigger cloud. I think we know AWS is the bigger cloud. I've been a pretty staunch advocate for Azure, and if the people that don't know me well would say, "Oh, you're just being a fanboy" or something like that. The people that do know me well laugh whenever anybody calls me a fanboy about anything. There's just numerous examples that I won't go into, but if you think that, you're wrong. I'll just say that. I'm an engineer, and if it works, it's good. And I've done some work with AWS, but when people ask me, is AWS, the best platform out there? I've said I didn't think so. And the reason I said that, I thought Azure made a lot of correct moves because they were the second mouse. The early bird gets the worm. AWS was there first for a lot of things. I mean, I could cite examples that are still kind of embarrassing to Microsoft, but Azure made some really cool moves based on missteps. Then if you're out there on the bleeding edge, you're going to get cut. That's the way it works. And AWS did, and Azure, solved for some problems early on. Not, I would say architecture if it wasn't the cloud, but I like to kind of zoom out a little bit. And I don't know the right word for it. I'm hesitant to use the word culture because that has so many connotations these days. But I will say philosophy. I will say there's this shell above architecture that's like philosophy. And Azure did some good things philosophically, and I think AWS has done them and is doing them, but because they were out there first and early, they had some missteps, and Azure was able to just kind of design over that part. They solved that problem before they hit it. If they'd have been first, who knows? They'd have probably made the same mistakes, and then AWS would have come along and done the same thing. But hearing conversations you and I have had offline, Frank, and knowing you as I do, are giving me pause to making that statement going forward that that Azure, may be running away with it. I personally know for a fact there's things each cloud does better than all the rest. IBM, Google, the whole nine yards. But you were super impressed, and you were in when Azure was being built. You were behind the scenes a bit, and then to hear you make a statement like, "No, you think AWS has really got it going on," gave me significant pause, mostly because of the source of that statement.
Thank you. So, I think philosophy is a good word to use, because and Kim and I would have this kind of debate back and forth. So if you
Sure.
don't know who we're talking about Kim Schmidt, who unfortunately passed away this September, but she was a big, I guess one would call her an AWS fangirl. Although, like you, I don't
Yeah.
think that tells the whole story.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that she was also kind of an engineer at heart, and
She was. Yeah.
But there is a different philosophy there, right? So
Mhm.
and it was kind of a thing that we kind of, her and I kind of came to this thing where it's like Lego pieces
Yeah.
versus bento boxes.
Okay.
So AWS, and again, this gets back to what I said earlier about the naming convention, right?
Mhm.
Like the names, if they come up for things, I'm sure they have good reason for them. But it was also very much like you need to know what Lego piece you're looking for.
Right.
And the discoverability of services in AWS, I think, makes the assumption that you already, it's a lot harder, basically. Whereas the discoverability in terms of Azure, I think, is a lot better. So I think Azure tends to be more like the bento box.
Gotcha.
Where everything is kind of more organized. And again, this is a sweeping generality, right?
Sure.
I know there's going to be edge cases all over the map here.
Right.
But the short of it is, I think that for the most part, Azure is a bit more like the bento box, right?
Right.
Where stuff can. My wife is calling me, so
you need to take that.
I do need. Well, I just told her she's upstairs, so
okay.
Must be something going on. But
okay.
I also didn't warn her that I was doing a live stream. But I will make this quick. I will be brief, which I know is very rare. But I think what you said is absolutely on point. It's a different philosophy, right?
Right.
And
right.
part of that is that one came first, the other one came second.
Right.
And I'm sure if I kind of grew up on the other side of the fence, right? You and I both grew up in the Microsoft ecosystem.
We did, yeah.
It should come to no surprise to anyone that the Microsoft philosophy and architecture makes more sense to us.
If we learned it first,
right? Or that's kind of aligns with the way we think, and
right,
vice versa.
It's our first language.
Universe, right? In a parallel universe, is there like an AWS Andy and AWS Frank, maybe, who think the other way?
Could be.
I don't know. Like this is one of those things where it becomes, philosophical, so to speak, right. In a different direction. Is one better or the other? I would say no. I used to be like rah Azure, but like now I kind of have had a chance to kind of Microsoft doesn't pay the mortgage anymore. So I can afford to be neutral. But I think that they serve different needs and they serve different audiences.
I think that's a very fair and astute observation that they do. And if you get used to one paradigm or one philosophy,
right.
And it's kind of what that's another way of restating what you said about the parallel universe, Andy and Frank. Once whatever it is you start with, when you learn the second one, it actually helps you with your first, understand your
Absolutely.
first piece first, and your first paradigm or philosophy and language. And so, yeah, I think there's value there in both of them. You go take care of your home stuff, Frank, and I gotta run.
Yeah, I gotta do that because. Well, definitely. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in live. This is going to be also be recorded as a podcast episode, and let us know what you think. Let Andy and I together, separately, whatever, know what you think. Like, should we start diving into the AWS not centric, but data topics that kind of live outside of the Azure ecosystem? We've done that, but not specifically kind of taking a sharp turn into AWS, which I think. For me personally, I think you nailed it right there, right? As someone who wrote a book on Silverlight, as someone who's written a number of Windows Phone apps, right? The danger of being monolingual, so to speak, is very real.
Yeah.
And I feel that a little more, what's the fancy word? Visceral? Like I feel that a little more to the gut than most people because of Silverlight, Windows Phone, Windows 8, XAML, right? And one of the appeals for me getting into data science is that math is the same, whether that it's running in a data center owned by somebody in Seattle or somebody in Redmond or somebody in Mountain View. or anywhere.
Right.
And for me, that math is truly that kind of that ultimate platform agnostic tool. But math alone doesn't do it, because obviously there's architecture. Decisions have to be made, right?
True.
In the open source world, they call that opinionated distribution or opinionated implementation of something.
Got it.
Which I thought was pretty funny. You're like,
that is
that's
good.
a good way to put it.
That's
a good way to put it. And again, I like being a Red Hat, because now I have that perspective of a third kind of neutral party, right? It's not AWS, it's not Microsoft, but we are obviously big partners with both. So you kind of get, it's an interesting kind of, it's like I've been taken out of flatland, so to speak. Like you think back, and like I can now look back and kind of see both worlds. And this was kind of this, and Kevin says, this sounds like this was a productive trip. Yeah, it totally was. It was a great trip on multiple levels. But just the ability to kind of sit back now. All right, well, I've been in the Microsoft conference ecosystem and all that, Microsoft ecosystem. Now let's see how the other half, does it. And it was very fascinating to kind of see the different philosophies, or we're all dealing with kind of the base core things. The laws of physics also don't change based on your data center. Right. The laws of computer science, the underlying fundamentals, also don't change. So just kind of seeing how these kind of evolve in parallel, and sometimes inspired by each other, sometimes not inspired. It was a very enlightening, I think, intellectual trip, which is something you rarely say about a trip to Vegas. And on that note, I'll end the stream.
Awesome.
All right, everyone out there, have a great day, and let us know if you want us to cover more of these kind of AWS-centric topics in the future. Thanks, and thanks for tuning in.